So tell me, because I know as part of that you started El Inquirer. You started it, and I remember when I interacted with you back in 2019. You were probably a year into it. It was like a one-woman show of it. It was just Jesenia. So tell me what that process. Tell me starting it. Tell me what that was like.
Sure.
Yeah.
El Inquirer is probably like the highlight of my career with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I'm very proud of everything that was achieved there, because when I started as a LenFest fellow, the intention was that we were supposed to, one, diversify the newsroom, because there wasn't enough women or people of color in that newsroom. Second, diversify the coverage, right? And part of diversifying that coverage was that everyone would work on specific topics or communities that the paper had an interest in, improving their reporting. And in my case, my responsibility was Latino communities, right? So the first thing that I figure out as a reporter who's new to Philadelphia, who knows nothing about Latinos in Philly, who was basically learning her way to do journalism for mainstream, because I had not worked for mainstream before. The first thing I learned is, one, racism is real inside newsrooms. Two, there are very difficult dynamics and relationships happening between marginalized populations and these media outlets. And three, groups like Latinos in a city like Philadelphia have already created their own spaces to navigate their worlds. And they do not need people who have been neglectful and people who have been irresponsible in the coverage about their people. So El Inquirer was basically my strategy to be able to open up doors and respond to what people told me that they needed at a certain moment. I had learned from them that they wanted to be able to understand the Inquirer's journalism better, and that most of Latinos in Philly appreciated to have it in Spanish. And the people started to call it El Inquirer. That was not me. No idea. It's like people saw it. Oh, mira, El Inquirer en español. Nice, chévere, buenísimo. And it picked up. And it just went from there, right? But it was still a passion project. It was outside of my job description. It was outside of, the things that I needed to do on a daily basis as a reporter. But it's the highlight of my career with the paper, because it was the tool that opened the doors to the communities so that they would see that there was a real interest in serving them in the ways that they wanted to be served.
You were relatively new to the city, and you were going out into these communities talking to Latinos in the city who, had been living here for 20, 30, 40 years maybe. And, they're familiar with the reputation of the Inquirer. What was it like for you to go into these communities and then, try to be that voice for them and build that trust when they have like these decades of thoughts and feelings about the publication?
Yeah, it was hard, Jensen. It was very hard. It was hard to the extent that I needed to be in person everywhere to be able to listen, learn, and engage with the people and bring them to a place where they would understood that I cared. So it was my job to figure things out. And I say it was my job to figure things out because there was no one else in the newsroom who could actually help me with that. And that goes again to how many Latinos, Hispanics are in these newsrooms. How many are also willing to be labeled as community journalists, or people who are serving their own people, which is an entire different conversation, but still part of it. Because there are generations of people and journalists still now today that they don't have the intentions of covering their own just because of the stigmas and the objectivity and all that stuff. So I knew I was doing the right thing. I just didn't know how to do it. Not for that media outlet. And that's where I needed to learn my way. And that's why I, pushed harder. And even though I didn't get permission during my week job to go out and do the engagement, I did it on the weekends. And even though I didn't get permission to cover some things, I would go to the event in the evening anyway. And that's why I can walk Philadelphia with my eyes closed, because I went to every single barrio I needed to find how to navigate those places that were not mine.
The Communities and Engagement Desk at the Inquirer, how did that come to fruition?
In June 2020, there was a headline, a famous one, that came out. Buildings matter too. And it disrupted our newsroom. Obviously because of the aftermath. Because of the momentum, a social reckoning, a racial reckoning. And in the reckoning of the newsroom came the anti-racist efforts called Ink for All. At the moment, it was an entirely different idea, a floating desk of some sort that had interest in covering communities from a specific standpoint. In the end, I think it's one of the legacies that are left from my work in Philadelphia, and is one of the ones that is going to have the highest impact at some point. But again, there are so many things that the Inquirer could do better that it's still kind of like improvement, but, past century kind of thing. We need something modern. We need something for now. I think it also speaks to the mindset of the largest population who is managing these spaces, and the tactics that are being used to convince people that people of diverse backgrounds and ideologies are needed. I mean, it just tells you how these ideas need to be communicated so that others understand the importance. And it talks to the extent of how limited we might be in understanding the value that inclusion and equity actually have. That's why equity is still a conversation that we need to have. And probably the underlying reason why I ended up leaving the paper. And it's because there are plenty of talks right now about the diversity that is needed. What inclusions mean for people like us. But there's no equity in the process. And apparently it takes too much to understand these concepts. We talk a lot about them. Not sure we understand the whole thing.
What steps do you think need to be taken so that, these three concepts can really, be put at the forefront, understood?
I wish I could say, listen to people of color. and take their word seriously on how to be able to address things. But we've tried that and that has not worked before. I mean, we've tried to listen. That's where I'm trying to get to, right? And listening is a much more difficult task than we actually think it is. So the reality is there are experiences that I know you have gone through that I can never grasp in its entirety. And that's fine because people experience things differently. The key, though, is I need to recognize that. And I need to be able to remove myself, let people who experience this in a better, different way than I do, take the leadership and go ahead and do the work. Because if I understand that I need to remove myself so that things can flow and be better, we have half of the game already done. But most of the time we don't. We want to stay in positions of power. Our ego doesn't let us get ourselves out of the way. So I'm not sure how to respond to that question because I'm not sure that we're actually really interested in making those changes happen. Especially when we want to have our hands on specific places, either where money or power is at. So